Thank you. So I will momentarily enter into prayer here, followed by 2 minutes of silence, and then we'll be brought back by the lovely music of these folks. And I want to welcome everyone as well joining us online. So please join me in prayer. Taking this deep breath, this inhalation and this exhalation, and dropping into that fulcrum point in between, knowing that there is only one life, one love, one power that is back behind all things. It shows up as power and peace and beauty, joy, love, light, and life. It is all of these qualities. And I see it in everything that I come across throughout my day, the way the trillium arrives in the Squaxin Forest, the way the orcas arrive in the San Juan Seas, and the way that cedar rises up to greet the sky, yet its roots remain grounded in the earth, grounded in its knowingness of its cedar self, not trying to be anything other than, not trying to be the hummingbird or the cloud or the wind, simply resting in the peace of itself. And I know that there's not a spot that this divine presence is not. It moves in, through, and as all things. And as such, I must be part of it. All of those God qualities, all that love, all that light, all that power resides within me. Just as a seed contains all those qualities for the embodiment of that plant, so too do I contain all the qualities of God within me at all times, waiting for more awareness and more embodiment. That's right. Yes, this is the truth. And this is the truth of me, and this is the truth for everyone here as well. All those qualities reside within them as well. It is their divine birthright to know this, to know that power, to step into it, to embody it more fully and more completely. And so it is from this place of consciousness I speak my word for this spiritual community here today. John O'Donohue, in his poem For the Interim Time, said, "What is being transfigured here is your mind. And it is sometimes difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you endure here, the more refined your heart will be for your arrival in the new dawn." And so I affirm and know for everyone here, whether they be in person or remote, that there is this refinement of the heart. It comes through the music. It comes through the words. It comes through the togetherness and the silence. And so I know, affirm, and declare that our time here is good. It allows more spiritual growth, more spiritual evolution for each one. And I am grateful for this. I am filled to the brim with gratitude for everyone here, for all the qualities that are showing and expressing through each one. I am thankful for the word that is spoken, the truth that is known, and for the law that always says, yes, yes, my beloved, may it be so. And so I lovingly release this word into that law, knowing that it is done, knowing that it has made its impression upon the consciousness of Christ. And I simply say, and so it is.
You know, sometimes in this teaching we tend to be very mental, yes? But have you noticed we have bodies? Sometimes it's fun to have a body, yes? In fact, most of the time, it's fun to have a body. So we got to get our bodies involved in this. Thank you for that wonderful song. It's written by Faith Rivera and Harold Payne. Faith Rivera is a fabulous, wonderful singer who these days lives in Hawaii and writes several songs that we sing on a regular rotational basis. So good morning once again. This whole year we're looking at the idea of living out loud. We're looking at living out loud. I'm going to turn that around so that heart is out there. Yes, where we can see it. And this month we're looking at cultivating authenticity. And I'm going to repeat the definition of authenticity that I used last week, which is from Brene Brown, from her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, which is an awesome book. How many have had, yes, several of you have read that. And she says, authenticity is the daily practice. How often? Daily. Practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. I love Tim's opening prayer, that the seeder doesn't sit there and go, well, maybe I should be a hummingbird too. And maybe at the same time I should be a cloud. I should be all things to all people, all the time. No, it's a seeder. You are you, I am I. Yes? And so it's opening up to that who we are and embracing who we are. Our talk title today is Boundaries Build Bridges. Say that 5 times real fast with me. And that idea seems counter to our kind of, our thinking, our ideas of how it should be, yes? Because we think that boundaries are walls and will cut off communication. But boundaries, healthy boundaries, define us. They define our individuality, our I am and you are. You know, spirit, we talk in the song about there's only one, and there is only one. We are all one, yes? And we're individualized forms of that infinite one. That's why you and I have different bodies, right? We're not just a collective hive mind going, whoa, whatever. Okay? We're individuals. We're unique. And we need that individuality to function in the world. I'm reading the book Whole Brain Living by the woman who was a neuroscientist who had a stroke. Jill Bolt Taylor, thank you. And she talks about after she had the stroke, her whole left brain was shut down, and she was just in her right brain only, and she said she was in a state of complete bliss, complete oneness. She did not know where she ended and the world began, or anything like that. How wonderful, yes? How non-functional in the world, right? She needed somebody to care for her 24/7. Okay? And so we have an individuality, we have a uniqueness that is ours that allows us to function and interact in the world, to function and interact with all these other wonderful expressions of the divine. Yes? Yes. And to enjoy them and to enjoy ourselves doing so. So before we look at boundaries, I want to first talk about, because we said boundaries build bridges. So let's talk about bridges. What we're building, bridges ease crossing over something difficult. Yes? If you have a bridge that goes over, I think of the bridges over Lake Washington up in Seattle, It's much better to be able to drive across the bridge than to try and swim across Lake Washington or kayak across Lake Washington or whatever. It makes it faster. If you have a bridge over a ravine, it's much better to take the bridge than to climb down the ravine with the risk of falling, ford the river or stream that's at the bottom of it and climb on back up again. Yes? Easier. Bridges are easier. They make the process of reaching a point easier. And so bridges are clearly defined structures. They have boundaries. We like it when they have guardrails. Yes? They connect. And this is what having healthy boundaries builds, is connections. We have clarity of communication so that people don't accidentally step on our emotional landmines and we go off in their face. I know none of you have ever actually done that, but you've probably experienced other people doing that to you, yes? Nancy Levine, in her book, Setting Boundaries Will Set You Free, says a boundary is, in essence, where you end and another person begins. Pretty straightforward, yes? And she goes on to say, it is a limit that you set to define what you will or will not do, or what you will or will not accept or tolerate from others. Yes? Breathe. So an example in operation. Last week I announced that I had just received a diagnosis of diabetes. And I established a boundary. I wanted no dietary advice and I wanted no dealing with the condition at the level of the condition, right? Okay? And there were two reasons for that boundary. And it's interesting to look at those two reasons because they give us information on what our motivations are with boundaries. The first one was fear-based aversion. And what that comes from is a previous center that I was the minister for had a group of people, probably about 25 or 30, all of whom were into special diets and special colonics and special multi-level marketing products. And every single Sunday, 3 to 5 of those people would always come up to me and go, you got to eat this, you got to do this colonic, you gotta, right? It was annoying. And my people-pleasing part wanted to support all of them, but this person over here is doing a completely different diet from this person over here, and there was no way, even if I turned myself into a total pretzel, that I could have pleased them all. Breathe. So you know what I'm talking about. You have those things in your lives. So I didn't want to start that thing up again here. Okay? And then the other motivation for setting that boundary was desire-based. I wanted myself and us as a community to look at truth, high truth, rather than dealing with the condition at the level of the condition. Let's fix the condition instead of saying what we normally do. What we really do, what we're really about is there is a higher truth and there is no disease in God and there is no disease in any one of us. If it ain't true of God, it ain't true of me. That's one of my favorite phrases, right? And so to hold that consciousness, most of you honored that. A couple of people didn't. And both encounters left me feeling ignored by what I asked, violated, in one case attacked, and in the other case fearful and hopeless. And fortunately, I've had follow-up conversations with both people, and we've had learning experiences from that whole process. Okay? Which brings us up to another aspect of healthy boundaries, communication and helping people to learn more about your boundaries and standing up for your boundaries when you set them. Breathe. Communication and helping people to learn more about your boundaries helps us all learn to communicate more effectively with each other. Many of us, probably not in this room, but you know people who were raised to not have boundaries. I think a couple of people like me recognize that. We were raised to be good boys, good girls, people pleasers, codependent and avoiding conflict. Don't rock the boat. Be happy with what you have. I had an uncle who used to say whatever was going on, it's better than a kick in the head by a Missouri mule. Yeah, thank you, Jim. Uncle Jim. Establishing healthy boundaries has the potential to create conflict, particularly with people who don't recognize or respect boundaries. Yes? Who, by the way, were just also people raised with no boundaries. And who put up walls instead to substitute for that. We're called to stand up for ourselves, to live out loud, whether in personal situations or globally or in culture. To say things like, racism, destroying the planet are not acceptable. These are my boundaries. I don't accept these. Or on a personal level, what it is that we do and don't want. We don't create our boundaries, we discover them or uncover them. They're already there. We all have these boundaries within us. We've all established those. But most of the time we were trained to ignore them. Not all of us, but many of us. The other thing with our boundaries is it's our responsibility to communicate them where and as appropriate. Otherwise, we expect other people to be mind readers. You should just know that that's a boundary. How many have experienced that? One side or the other of that equation, doesn't matter. And that violates both people's boundaries because nobody knows what's going on and nobody feels good about it. It also helps to understand the difference between walls and boundaries. Walls tend to be rigid and limiting, and ultimately we're imprisoned in our own walls and we can't get out. Boundaries can flex and change by our choice. By whose choice? Our choice. For instance, after the service last week, a couple of people did talk to me about how they handle their diabetes. And it wasn't an in-your-face, you should do this. It was just, I have diabetes, or I have worked with people with diabetes, and I have experienced this. And it reminded me that it's reversible, just dealing with symptoms. Reminded me or informed me of some helpful tools and healthy tools to use. And in those cases, they simply shared what worked for them without telling me what I should or shouldn't do. And they provided me with helpful information, helped me understand and clarify my boundary, and reminded me that boundaries are semi-permeable membranes. That is, they will let in some stuff, the stuff we want, and keep out the stuff we don't want. It's the best kind of boundary to have. And boundaries can change. In the flexibility, what I'll say is as we grow, as we establish boundaries, for instance, we learn what our boundary really is. So I had a clarification. My boundary was, I don't want to hear anything about the condition. That would be stupid. That's not living in this world. But I don't want to be told what to do with an in-your-face sort of consciousness. Yes? Okay. And so a boundary we can learn about, and as we practice boundaries, we'll learn, we'll adjust, we'll figure them out more and more as we grow. And they can change. And they do change over time. When I was in my early 20s, I worked with a woman who was very touchy-feely. And every time she could touch me, I would flinch. Because for me, from my background, from my growing up, touch was not a pleasant experience. Just leave it there. And she would kind of laugh and say, oh, I forgot, I can't touch you. And it wasn't a humiliating laugh or a denigrating laugh. It was just a playful sort of thing. At the time, her action violated my boundaries of those days. Today, as most of you know, I'm a little more open to touch. Yes? Yeah. Love to hug, love to be touched, and touching. So boundaries can change, and it's good to pay attention as we grow. What is the current state of my boundaries? Where am I with that? And notice perhaps where we become more open and perhaps more closed. There are certain things I would tolerate in my childhood out of my fact that I was raised without a whole lot of boundaries, healthy boundaries, that I no longer tolerate. It's like, no, I'm sorry, you cannot do that with me. And there are other things that I was out of fear saying, yes, now I want to do that. So paying attention to where our boundaries are, and as they grow and shrink and expand and do all sorts of things, paying attention to that. And then it's also helpful to notice, and healthy to notice, the labels we attach to actions, both our own and other people's. See, that same woman also commented back then, when I was like 22 or 23, that I used my tongue like a sword to keep people away. And she was accurate. She was right. I didn't realize it until she said it, but it's like she was right. I was very acerbic and acidic in what I and how I talked. And although I've decreased that a lot, I still do that a bit when I feel hurt or afraid. When I first came here, I was criticized for being sarcastic. Sarcastic is a label, yes? It's a label, it's a perception. And I worked on that quite a bit. I started to pay attention. Am I speaking from my hurt or am I speaking from my heart? And notice where I was coming from in that process. But I also noticed that there were people who told me they loved my sarcasm and sense of humor. And I became aware that what I and some others labeled as humor or wordplay, others labeled as sarcasm. The first group enjoyed it, the second group was offended by it. And then because many of the people who loved my sarcasm were also some of the largest donors to the center, I knew it was in the best financial interest of the center to continue to be sarcastic. Now that was either humor or sarcasm, depending on your label, right? So as we uncover our boundaries, it's also helpful to examine our own labels. How am I labeling myself? How am I labeling what's coming to me from other people? And paying attention to that. There's no right or wrong. I don't have a manual to tell you how to do that. But just notice it, what it is for you. Notice the labels we place on certain behaviors, certain actions, and ask, especially for boundaries designed to protect us from perceived hurts and wounding, do I really need a boundary here? Or do I need to perhaps expand or shift my perception here? And most of us would rather have a boundary because a boundary says, you violated my boundary rather than I have to change. You have to change instead of me having to change. Healthy boundaries allow us to change within, which is what we're about. Healthy boundaries support us in defining and expressing who we authentically are, and that authentic self changes and grows as we live. Who am I authentically? Who do I want to be in this world? What am I really about? Am I here to be a hummingbird or a cedar? So the process of discovering healthy boundaries is the process of discovering our own healthy, authentic identity. It's the process of claiming or reclaiming our real power, no longer being doormats, no longer being amoebas, just take whatever shape kind of works, or people pleasers afraid of any conflict and willing to suffer and be martyrs to avoid displeasing somebody else. It's also a process of not putting ourselves behind solid walls that keep us rigidly locked up. So it's a process, and we do encounter conflict. And Buffy and I are studying spiral dynamics at the moment, and there's a values meme called Green that hates conflict. Everybody should just get along. I have news for you. Conflict is a part of life. Breathe.
I disagree.
Well, you're wrong. When we avoid outer conflict, we amplify our inner conflict. When we avoid outer conflict, we take it on and we amplify our inner conflict as we feel used and violated and unsatisfied in our own self-expression. So as we clarify our boundaries, and in turn our healthy, authentic self, we learn to say yes what we mean to say yes to, and no to what we mean to say no to. And sometimes, if we're not used to it, that can take time to listen to our own inner voice, to kind of go, I'm not quite sure yet. Let me get back to you on when somebody asks something of us. We experience this every once in a while when we ask people, would you like to be on council? And I appreciate the people who say, let me be with that for a little bit and think about that and get back to you. Because what I know is we're getting a conscious process about that. So it sometimes can take time to listen to our own inner voice, particularly if we have a long history of just saying yes and practicing people-pleasing when we'd rather say no. And as the saying goes, no is a complete sentence. No excuses, no explanations, no nothing needed, just no. Once we know our boundaries, it's an act of love to share them. It's an act of love to communicate them with each other because it prevents the other person from stepping on our landmines, being totally confused and not being able to read our minds and feeling confused about that. It's an act of love to communicate. Boundaries help others love us better and us to be more clear on who we are. Authenticity is a practice, and as we said at the start, a daily practice. We can start right now where we are today. We can start right now, right where we are today. We can forgive ourselves and others for being perfectly imperfect and begin again. How many of you have been perfectly imperfect? And how many of you have encountered people who are perfectly imperfect? Okay? So we can forgive that. We can let go of the condemnations we place on ourselves and others. We can love ourselves and others by being brave and clarifying, this is what I will or will not do. This is what I will not accept or tolerate. And being clear about that. This will build bridges of connection, and it's an act of living out loud. So this week I want to invite you to notice where you feel that your boundaries may not be respected, and clarify first with yourself, then those around you, about your boundaries. Communicate. Yeah, that's commune, which is together. Icate. I don't know what icate stands for. Talk to each other, especially in your closer relationships. If you've noticed that you feel like your boundaries are being a little bit pushed or violated, just communicate. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify. This is my boundaries. Are you willing to play with that as a spiritual practice this week? Yeah. Great. I'm going to close with a pair of quotes. The first one comes again from Brene Brown from her book, Rising Strong. She says, compassionate people ask for what they need. Compassionate people ask for what they need. Now, sometimes that's not quite how we were taught compassion, right? You know, greater love than this hath no one than to lay down their life for another. That's one of our things we were held up as compassion. That's not a healthy model. I mean, there are times that we do that. There are times we set aside our personal agenda, but not to give ourselves up completely. I am nothing. I am all here, just all for you. We can't sustain that. Trust me, I've tried. I bet you some of you have tried. So passionate people ask for what they want. They say no when they mean it, and they say yes when they mean yes. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. When our boundaries get violated, we end up, if we don't communicate, we end up in resentment. And the second quote is from Ernest Holmes. And he says, you rob no person when you discover your own good. You limit no person when you express a greater degree of livingness. You hinder no person's evolution when you consciously enter the kingdom of your good and possess it today. You hinder no person's evolution when you consciously enter into the kingdom of your good and possess it today. Breathe. And we have an affirmation. Say this with me. I clarify, communicate, and honor my healthy boundaries. One more time. I clarify, communicate, and honor my healthy boundaries, and so it is. Does I fall off the step? And I invite you to look around once again at the faces and hearts of God, remembering that yours is one of those. Take a breath. Moving into that heart space, that space of inner deep wisdom, inner connection. That connects us with spirit, connects us with our own selves, and then connects us with the outer world. There is one infinite presence, present on every level of being, as every level of being. This presence is life, aliveness, vitality. It is love. It is wholeness. It is peace. It is joy. It is the power to express. This presence is all that there is, and therefore, since each of us is and must be one of that infinite presence, because frankly, there's nowhere else to be. It's the only game in the big town known as the universe. We are life, and we are love, and we are wholeness, and we are power and peace and beauty and joy. We are all of that. And so I speak my word that this week we remember who we are and express our unique individuality in ways that are a blessing to ourselves and others. That healthy boundaries help us to channel our energy in ways that support all of life. We get to be the cedar we choose to be, or the hummingbird we choose to be, or the cloud we choose to be, or the whoever we choose to be. We express that, we communicate that, we live it out loud with joy and power. And I'm grateful for all of the good that comes from this for each and every one of us and for the world that we touch. Because as we open ourselves up, we ripple out in consciousness everywhere. And so I release this knowing, this idea into the fertile soil of the law for the purpose of allowing it to manifest, to express, to grow in, through, and as each and every one of us. And it does. And we affirm that together by saying, and so it is.